Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another season of the Summer Dine and Learn. It's 13th year, the Bar Mitzvah year. Actually, that's very appropriate. I'm proud and happy to be sponsoring tonight's dinner in honor of my son Sally, who turned 13 today, and that can come for a minyan. Mr. Shem, Leah Latoro will be the Shabbos. Everyone's invited with Kiddush. And because it's always been unclear whether they counted for a minyan, I had to. Now you know officially you get counted for a minyan. So this summer past few summers I've been choosing odd topics. So the odd topic for this summer is Halachah from the Golden Age of Poland. Intentionally vaguely worded. What is the Golden Age of Poland? So I'll try to explain my own opinion on the subject. 1492 was a big year in history. The Jews were expelled from Spain. Columbus sailed and discovered America, possibly connected. Additionally, a Jew from Prague moved to Krakow and opened a yeshiva there. His name was Rabbi Polak. Rabbi Polak was a brilliant educator, and he had this system, this derech halimud of pilpul. One Gemara says this, another Gemara says that. What's the difference? You have to figure out the difference. Brilliant, challenging. He attracted students from all over. Instead of the Polish students going to Germany to learn, the German students started going to Poland. And his yeshiva in Krakow was the pride of the Jewish world, at least the European Jewish world. And for at least a time, Poland was the center of the excitement of Jewish learning. And at that time, Spain was obviously declining, and even the Spanish exiles, who we talked about last summer in the Mediterranean period, so they had a brief spark where there was brilliant halakha in Egypt and Turkey and all sorts of places. It kind of declined after that. Never disappeared, but it was never as bright as it was in the 1500s. So 1492, let's say roughly 1500, is when the golden age of Torah began in Poland. The Jews had been in Poland for about 500 years by then, but it was really a backwards country. It was sort of a commercial colony of Germany. It was kind of like the suburbs. Germany was the center, and Poland was just the outskirts. Beginning with the Crusades, so the anti-Semitism in Germany and France was getting so big, so terrible, that Jews were fleeing and they went to Poland. But they never really made Poland an Ir Ve'em, a center of Jewish community. It was just a place to escape to. So why wasn't there anti-Semitism in Poland? Of course there was. It's a Catholic country. It's still a Catholic country. The church dominated, and the Christian anti-Semitism taught by the Pope and the priests dominated the masses. But what did they have in Poland that they didn't have in Germany? It was an economically backwards country, and the nobility needed the Jews to do business. So Jews brought money to these otherwise poor nobles and made them rich. So the Jews had protection, and over time they got more and more rights, and that is part of what allowed for the Golden Age. In the 1400s, the 1500s, there was just in general in the world, there was increasing liberalism. The Renaissance was going on in Italy, and those ideas were spreading forth, and it was a perfect time. Rabbi Polak came to Poland at the perfect time, as the Jews were getting more rights, and the nobles needed them even more because there was more democracy was going. The nobles needed to keep on the power. And he came with his brilliance. He trained a generation of rabbis. And those rabbis taught high-level Torah throughout Poland. Every community had some sort of yeshiva that the Rav led, with Bachrim and married men learning. Even the Balabatim were learning. There was just a high level of Torah observance and Torah learning. So the two main Talmidim of Yaakov Polak that I think should be mentioned. One is the Maharam Padua. Maharam Padua has a very exotic-sounding name. He was not exotic at all. His real name was Meir Kasanelebogen. He was a Polish Jew, a big Talmud Chacham who learned in Krakow. Then he went to Italy. As I said, the Renaissance was flourishing there. Art, culture, science. In Padua, they had a medical school that they opened up to Jews. Jews were allowed to go to medical school for the first time. I think the first time. There were quotas. They didn't just let the Jews flood it. But what Jewish mother doesn't want their son to become a doctor? So the young Jewish men flooded to Padua, to Italy in general. And so at the beginning of the 1400s, Rabbi Yehuda Mintz from Germany went to Padua, opened up a yeshiva, an Ashkenazi yeshiva in Italy, where he trained many people, including Sephardic Rabbanim in the 1500s. So Maharam, Reb Meir, he moved to Padua, learned in the yeshiva, married the Rosh Yeshiva's daughter, and eventually, as things happened, became Rosh Yeshiva. So towards the end of Maharam Mintz's life, the yeshiva kind of declined. I don't know why. There are all sorts of administrative reasons why it declined. When Maharam Padua became Rosh Yeshiva, the power of his personality and his genius made it the yeshiva to go to. He put Padua back on the Torah map. His Bezdin, the Ramah, refers to his Bezdin as the best Bezdin in Europe. He was a towering figure. He was a cousin of the Ramah, but a much older cousin. That's going to be important in a few minutes. The other major Talmud of Rabbi Yaakov Polak was Reb Sholem Shachna. Has anyone heard of Reb Sholem Shachna?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's the figure behind all of modern Torah to some degree. His Talmidim are household names. The Ramah, the Bach, the Shach, the Sma, the Prisha, the Trisha, all these people, the Chelkas Mechokek, these are all Talmidim of Reb Sholem Shachna. He was a Talmud of Yaakov Polak. He moved to Lublin, opened up the yeshiva in Lublin that trained all of the Mefarshim on Shulchan Aruch who we know, who we learn, more or less. Obviously, he only had a limited life, but his Talmidim changed the next generation. He was the beginning of this big Ashkenazic tradition of Halachah that we all know. So in his yeshiva, they learned Pilpul. He was a master of Pilpul. And we have two tshuvas left that remain from him. Neither he nor Rabbi Yaakov Polak wrote really much. We have two tshuvas from Reb Shachna. I tried to struggle through going through one of the tshuvas of Reb Shachna. I don't see any Pilpul in it. It's really just going through a sugya with pshat, going through the Rishon and really trudging through. It's very hard, actually. So I don't see it there, but he was famous for this Pilpul. In his yeshiva, they learned Pilpul, they learned Tur, and they learned Mordechai. Those last two are important. Why do we have so many commentaries on the Tur? The Bach, the Darkei Moshe, the Prisha, and the Drisha. Because that's what they learned in yeshiva. That was what they learned every day. The Mordechai, if you look in the back of the Mordechai, we don't really learn Mordechai, but you see all sorts of commentaries on the bottom. Who's spending all this time on the Mordechai? Now you know, it was in Lublin, they spent all that time on the Mordechai. So his son-in-law was a Ramah. The Ramah went to learn in Lublin. He married Reb Sholem Shachna's daughter. Reb Sholem Shachna was appointed the chief rabbi of Poland. The king appointed him. Now, fact, Krakow was the capital of Poland. The chief rabbi was in Lublin. To be appointed chief rabbi when you don't even live in the capital, you had to be of that level of fame that he had, that he could be the chief rabbi of Poland. Okay, so moving on. In 1573, something very important happened. Poland had a reformation. Instead of just being a monarchy, they became a republic with an elected king. So what does that mean? It means whenever there's a change of transition, a king dies, who's the next king? Not necessarily his son. The nobles get to vote for it. And over time, so the nobles still had power. They voted for the king. Over time, the masses gained more and more power, and the nobles lost more and more power and became more democratic. We like to think of that as good, right? More democracy, less power for the nobility. But if you're Jews in an anti-Semitic country, not so good. And so things started to deteriorate pretty quickly after that. Culminating in 1648, which if you change that into Hebrew years, that's Taf Ches, Tach V'Tat. That's 1648, 1649, the Chmelnytsky massacres. That changed everything. It was a game changer. Instead of a golden age of Poland, Jews started leaving Poland en masse. Torah learning declined. It didn't disappear. Nothing disappeared. Poland was still there. Jews were still there. My grandparents were from Poland. Lasted another 400 years. 300 years. But it was the end. Germany had gone down because of the Crusades and other anti-Semitism, while Poland rose. then Poland was leveled out. They were all just bad places for Jews to live. So what I'm calling the golden age of Poland is from about 1500 to about 1650. Those 150 years, I thought we could discuss some of the big halachic issues that came up. Now, if we were to discuss every halachic issue written about by the Talmidei Chachamim in that generation, we'd be here for eternity. Because again, Shach, Bach, Taz, it's endless. It's all these. One of the things that Reb Shlomo Shachna taught his Talmidim, do as I say, not as I do, is write. So they wrote a lot. They were prolific writers. And we don't even have all the things that they wrote. They wrote so much. But what we do have still fills up a full bookshelf. So instead what I thought is I'd go through the Tshuva Svarim, look through some interesting disagreements. If it's just one, if there's no disagreement, it's not particularly interesting. Although I'll go back on that in about a minute. There's a book that was published in the mid-90s, a timeline of Jewish history. I forgot the name. Matis, I don't remember his last name. Cantor. Matis Cantor. And what he does is from Adam to the late 1900s, he goes through every major event in every year, and every, let's say, 50 years, he puts a timeline of the big Gedolim living in those days, or the big Nevi'im, or what, throughout history. Now, of course, if you go through all history, there are going to be many, many, disagreements about years and things like that. So, but he has to take a stand on that. He's very open about it, a lot of question marks on the years, but it's a fantastic, fantastic book, definitely out of print. I don't even know if Mizrahi has it, it's still out of print. But so he had this idea that he didn't even want to call them Achronim. From the 1500 to 1650, he said, these are not Achronim, these are more important. He had this idea that he calls them the Kovim, because they established Halachah that we later we discussed. So he calls the Shulchan Aruch, the Shach, the Taz, the Bach, he calls them the Kovim. I don't know whether that's correct or not, but it makes a point that this is a unique period in history. Interestingly enough, we will not be discussing the Magen Avram, because the Magen Avram was 13 years old when Tach V'Tat happened. So he is after our period, even though really he's part of it. But we'll leave him out as much as possible. So let's now go to an actual case. The Ramah was born in 1530. He married the daughter, as I said, of Reb Shlomo Shachna, the chief rabbi. And in 1550, he was appointed the rabbi of Krakow, the capital of Poland. Think of that. At the age of 20, he became the rabbi of the capital city of Poland. That's a unique genius. I don't have to tell you, the Ramah, when he on his tombstone it says, Mi Moshe ad Moshe ad Moshe lokom kemoshe, right? The person who coined that was a Maharshal, an older contemporary of his who we'll discuss. The Maharshal was like that grumpy old Talmud Chacham who doesn't like things changing. He was not a fan of Pilpul. He liked the old style of learning Pshat. And so he was a difficult man to deal with. He had comments about everybody and everything. But he liked the Ramah. He thought this guy was something special, and he was. He was a rare genius, extraordinarily humble. You read his tshuvas, say, wow, you wouldn't know that this is... everybody has a different style. When the Rambam writes a tshuva, he's biting and he's sharp. He's still humble, but he's sharp. The Ramah is like apologizing every other word and just, it's only my opinion. He's a Ramah. He wrote the Ashkenazic standard psak of halacha for generations to come, but he was very humble. 1552. So he's 22 years old. There was a plague in Krakow. Within a few months, his grandmother, his mother, and his wife died. It's devastating. There's something like that happened to Rav Soloveitchik in, I think, 1967. His mother, his wife, and his brother died. He was devastated. He almost left yeshiva, and he had to, Rabbi Norman Lamb, to his great credit, convinced Rav Soloveitchik to come back. The Ramah suffered this incredible tragedy. He remarried pretty quickly because he was very young. He needed to have kids. He remarried one of the richest Talmidei Chachamim in Krakow. I think his name was Mordechai Katz. His last name was Katz. I know that. It's important because his brother-in-law, we'll be discussing very often, his brother-in-law was a big Dine in Krakow, but also it basically set the Ramah for life. He didn't have to worry about money anymore. His wife had a PhD, right? The Papa has dough. So Baruch Hashem, they did fine. He died in 1572. Let's do the math. The Ramah lived from 1530 to 1572. He died at the age of 42. How many people here are over the age of 42? It's embarrassing. What he accomplished in his life. Wow.
That's what I'm embarrassed about.
So let's discuss his first major tshuva, published at the age of 20. So let's think about what's going on in this time period, right? 1500s. So in 1455, Gutenberg invented the printing press with movable type. Before then, if you needed a sefer, if you needed a book, a scribe had to write it by hand. Copy took forever. Now they just set up the type of each page, put ink on it, right? It takes time to set up the type of each page, put ink on it, and then boom, 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 page after copy after copy after copy. Still took time, but it was a major revolution, and it changed the world because it made literacy available, and that basically increased democracy, broke up the Catholic Church, and did all sorts of things. So, of course, the Jews quickly adopted it. The first sefer ever published, actually, I don't remember what it was, but very quickly, Rashi al Torah was published. So Rashi al Torah is interesting because if you look in any Chumash, every Rashi or every other Rashi has parentheses and brackets. Very unclear what the words are, and the reason is because there were so many different versions. Because it was so important, it was a household sefer. Everybody had it, and everybody started making additions and this and that. After a few hundred years, they weren't very clear on what the correct manuscript was. So if you look at the Mossad HaRav Kook Rashi, they also had brackets and parentheses and footnotes. The footnotes always defer to the first printed edition of the Rashi al Torah. They give it precedence. I have no idea why, because within the first 20 years, there were over a dozen different editions of Rashi. Each one had different texts. So which is right, which is not? Why do you give precedence to the first one that went to market? I don't know. So in Italy, the big publisher was Sonsino. The other big publisher in Venice was Daniel Bomberg, a Christian.
A Christian?
Yes, that's how he got the rights. Italy was, more Catholic than the Pope. I mean, so they weren't so happy about Jews publishing Sforim. But if you have a Christian willing to do it, so then that gives it a totally different flavor. So he got permission to do it, and he was very successful. The standard Mikros Gedolos, he put it out. When he retired in Venice, two publishers tried to take his place, Giustiniani and Bragadin. And by the way, I have this book, fantastic book, came out maybe a year or two ago, People of the Book, the history of printing, Jewish printing. Fantastic book. Published by Feldheim, is it? Yeah, Feldheim. So, as we said with Rashi, what happens when you start publishing quickly? So you can publish a few hundred copies of the same book, but who says it's correct? They quickly put the letters on it. There's going to be mistakes. Guaranteed, you're going to have mistakes, especially at first. You can redo it again, a second edition, third edition. Eventually, you're going to fix all the mistakes, or most of them. But the first edition, forget about it. It's going to be riddled with mistakes. And that happened with the Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah was full of mistakes. So the Maharam Padua, remember him, a Polish rabbi in Italy, who was the Gadol Hador, he spent years and raised tons of money to fix the text of the Rambam. He has his comments on the bottom of the Venice edition of the Rambam, of the Mishnah Torah, where he fixed the text. And the Kesef Mishnah, who lived at the same time, he quotes it, the Beis Yosef. He quotes it. He says, the Magia, he didn't know who he was, some guy, the editor. Someone sent him a tshuva saying, this Magia is a Gadol Hador. He didn't know that. So he went with, who did he choose with publisher in Venice? He chose Bragadin. I don't know why, he chose Bragadin. So Giustiniani, worried about losing his market share, quickly rushed to market his own edition of Mishnah Torah. And he sold it at a price specifically to undercut the other edition. So the Maharam Padua, who had spent years and a fortune putting this together, was set for financial failure. So he sent a request to the rabbis of Poland, please do something about it. And his cousin, the Ramah, his younger, 20-year-old cousin, this is in 1550, just became chief rabbi of Krakow. Fresh, a young kid. So he writes a tshuva about it. This is Tshuvas of the Ramah Siman Yud. This is the first and most important tshuva about this new technology of the printing press. It had existed less than a century. So the Ramah starts out with a simple question. Why should anybody care? They're two Christians. What does Halachah have to say about it? So he starts out talking about the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. How does that apply here? So he says, one of the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach is Dinim. They have to have laws, established laws. So okay, they establish laws. So he says, no, they have to establish the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Torah. The halachas of Choshen Mishpat are the dinim they have to apply. And this, actually, he doesn't quote it, but the Ramban in Parshas Vayishlach says this as well. So why does the Ramban talk about Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach? With Shechem. Why did they kill Shechem? Because they violate, because the Rambam says, why did the brothers kill Shechem? Because the people of Shechem didn't establish dinim. And they violated the Sheva Mitzvah, that one of the Sheva Mitzvahs, Bnei Noach of dinim. And the Ramban says that Sheva Mitzvah, the halacha of dinim, is that you have to establish halacha, the Choshen Mishpat, the Nezikin laws, that is what the Gentile judges have to follow. So therefore, we're running out of time. The Ramah gives 4 reasons why we should buy the Maharam Padua's edition of Mishneh Torah through Bragadin and not the Justiniani edition. Number 1, he says, is Hasagas Gvul. So the standard case of Hasagas Gvul is if there's a dead end and you're at the beginning of the block, you have a store, you're towards the middle of it, you have a store, someone sets it up earlier on the block, so everybody has to pass by him before they go to you. So you're definitely going to face financial disaster because all your customers are going to go to the other guy first. So the Ramah says it doesn't have to be necessarily on a dead-end block. That's not the case. The case is it has to be Bari Hazeka. It has to be for sure, definite damage. He says in this case where he's specifically pricing it to undercut, that's definite damage, it's Hasagas Gvul. Number 2, there's a case, the Gemara in Bava Basra Chav Beis Amud Aleph says Rav Dimi was coming on a boat with figs to sell, and the Reish Galusa, as he was coming off the boat, the Reish Galusa told the guy, said, check it out, if he's a Talmud Chacham, we'll give him the monopoly for the day to sell figs, no one else is allowed to sell figs. So, interesting story, they tested him out, and they said, maybe not such a Talmud Chacham, and then came a whole debate how to prove that Rav Dimi was a Talmud Chacham, of course he was. So the Ramah said, you see, you should buy from a Talmud Chacham before you buy from anybody else. He gets precedence. The pasuk says, Bnei David Bnei David Kohanim. But they were not Kohanim. They were from Shevet Yehuda. So the Gemara in Nedarim says, no, just like a Kohen goes first, a Talmud Chacham also goes first. A Bnei David with Talmud Chachamim. So you should buy from them first. Reason number 2. Number 3, the pasuk says, O kano miyad amitecha. You should buy from a Jew before a Gentile if it's basically the same product. And even if it's more expensive, you should buy from the Jew. Why? Because we're cousins, we're family. You make sure your family has business before you go beyond the family. And there's a Gemara in Ksubas who says you're not allowed to keep a Sefer Torah she'eino muga, a Sefer Torah that has not been checked to verify that it is correct, that is accurate text. So the Rosh says on that, it's not just a Sefer Torah. We're worried that you'll learn Torah, you'll reach an incorrect conclusion based on a wrong text. And therefore, any sefer, Gemara, Halachah, anything like that, the Rif, if it hasn't been checked and validated the text, you're not allowed to keep it. So Justiniani's text is not validated, while the Maharam Padua's validated the text. So you have to buy the Maharam Padua's. And therefore, the Ramah says he's issuing a cherem together with other rabbis in Poland. Nobody's allowed to buy the Justiniani edition until Maharam Padua sells out. Then you can buy whatever you want. Let the first edition sell out, let the Maharam Padua make back his investment. So what doesn't the Ramah say? First of all, he didn't say Justiniani is playing dirty. So don't buy from him because he's just playing dirty and trying to put the other guy. He doesn't say that. I don't know why. I would have said that. I'd say he's a no good Nick. Why are you buying from no good Nick? He's trying to make trouble. Don't fall into his trap. He doesn't say that. I don't know why. Number 2, he doesn't talk about copyright. You'd think with the printing press, the first thing they would talk about is copyright. Why doesn't he talk about copyright? So Chasam Sofer says, because what copyright are you talking about? The Rambam's text? That's not copyrighted. The Maharam Padua, okay, so his comments are copyrighted, but he didn't copy that. He copied that. He just published. So the copyright isn't even relevant to this text, this case. So in the end, the cherem went out. Maram Padua's edition became the famous Venice Rambam edition, and the other one, I'm sure it sold, it did fine, but nobody really cares about that. If you could buy it, it's probably a collector's item, but don't use it because the text is not so good. Not so good. So we ran out of time. Mr. Shem will continue next week with other shilohs from this era.